about you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only. Shout out to King Saul's boss in the building about you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only. Shout out to King Saul's boss in the building about you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only.
Blood on his kitchen floor.
Shout out to King Saul's boss in the building about you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only.
Her husband.
Shout out to King Saul's boss in the building about
fighting for his life. Investigators began examining what appeared to be a violent home invasion. No one suspected that this bloody assault was just the beginning of a deadly chain of events that would end with another body and a shocking revelation. To friends, family, and neighbors, Marcus and Tiana Johnson were the couple who seemed to have it all figured out. Both 38, they had been married for 15 years after meeting in college. As African Americans who had overcome significant obstacles to achieve professional success, they were respected figures in their community. Marcus worked as a senior accountant at a local firm, where colleagues described him as methodical, reliable, and quietly ambitious. Tiana had built a successful career in digital marketing at a prestigious agency, where her outgoing personality and creative thinking had recently earned her a promotion to team leader. They were always together at neighborhood cookouts and community meetings, said one neighbor who lived next door to the Johnsons for 8 years. Marcus was more reserved, but Tiana lit up every room she entered. They seemed to balance each other perfectly. The Johnsons' social media accounts showed vacations to Jamaica, Mexico, and Europe. They volunteered regularly at the local food bank and attended church every Sunday. Their home was well maintained, with a carefully tended garden that Tiana often showcased on her Instagram page. On the surface, they represented relationship goals to many who knew them. What no one saw were the growing tensions behind closed doors. According to later statements from co-workers and private messages recovered by investigators, the marriage had begun to feel suffocating to Tiana around 3 years before the stabbing incident. She started talking about feeling trapped, said a co-worker who became a confidant. She'd say things like, "I got married too young and I never got to really live. At first, I thought it was just normal relationship frustration." In January 2019, Tiana's company hired a new creative director. Tall, charismatic, and recently divorced, this man quickly became the center of attention in the office, particularly for Tiana. Security camera footage later obtained from the office building showed the two often working late together, their body language suggesting a growing intimacy. By March, what began as innocent flirtation had developed into a full-blown affair. Cell phone records would later reveal hundreds of text messages between Tiana and her co-worker, many explicit in nature. Hotel receipts showed they met at a nearby motel twice weekly, usually during lunch breaks or after claiming to work late. She seemed almost giddy those months, remembered another co-worker. She started dressing differently, lost weight, and was always checking her phone. Classic signs looking back on it, but at the time I just thought she was excited about her promotion. Meanwhile, Marcus remained oblivious, his attention focused on a major project at work that required long hours and frequent weekend commitments. The distance between them grew, with Marcus noticing his wife's increasing absences but attributing them to her own career demands. On June 15, 2019, Marcus came home early from a canceled business trip. He had intended to surprise Tiana, stopping to buy her favorite takeout and a bottle of wine. Instead, he discovered incriminating text messages on Tiana's tablet, which she had left synced to her phone and charging on the kitchen counter. According to what investigators would later piece together, Marcus spent hours reading through months of messages between his wife and her lover. The exchanges revealed not only the physical affair but also the emotional betrayal, messages where Tiana complained about her marriage and mocked Marcus's habits and personality. When Tiana returned home around 7:30 p.m., she found Marcus sitting at the kitchen table with her tablet open in front of him. What happened next would only be fully understood months later. A heated confrontation erupted in the Johnson home. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices but no clear words. Based on evidence that would eventually come to light, Marcus had calmly informed Tiana that their marriage was over and that he intended to tell everyone, their families, friends, and co-workers about her affair. He wanted everyone to know who she really was. As the argument escalated, Tiana became increasingly desperate. When Marcus turned to leave the kitchen, she grabbed a chef's knife from the wooden block on the counter and attacked him from behind. The medical report documented 6 stab wounds, 2 to the back, 1 to the right shoulder, 2 to the abdomen when Marcus turned to defend himself, and 1 final thrust to the chest that narrowly missed his heart but collapsed his right lung. Marcus collapsed on the kitchen floor as Tiana, apparently shocked by her own actions, dropped the knife. She stood frozen for several minutes before calling 911 at 8:17 p.m. "My husband's been stabbed. Someone broke in," she screamed to the dispatcher. "Please hurry. There's so much blood. The back door was open." When police arrived 5 minutes later, they found Tiana applying pressure to Marcus's wounds with kitchen towels. She told officers that an intruder had attacked Marcus and fled through the back door when she came home. Officers noted that the back door was indeed open, and given the neighborhood had experienced several break-ins in recent months, they initially treated the scene as a home invasion gone wrong. Marcus was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, having lost nearly 2 liters of blood. Emergency surgery lasted 5 hours as doctors worked to repair a punctured lung, a lacerated liver, and severe muscle and tissue damage. The detective assigned to the case took Tiana's statement at the hospital while Marcus underwent surgery. Through tears, she described coming home to find a masked man standing over her bleeding husband before the attacker fled through the back door. She couldn't provide a detailed description, claiming everything happened too quickly and that her focus had been on helping Marcus. Unlike many domestic violence cases, the police found Tiana's story credible. The back door showed subtle signs that could be interpreted as forced entry. Nothing valuable appeared to be missing, but the detectives theorized that Tiana's arrival might have interrupted the intruder before they could steal anything. Crime scene technicians collected evidence from the home, including the knife found on the floor. They took photographs of blood spatter patterns and dusted for fingerprints, but the initial investigation focused on finding the alleged intruder rather than scrutinizing Tiana's account. Marcus remained unconscious for 3 days following surgery. During this time, Tiana rarely left his bedside, presenting herself as the devoted wife to hospital staff and visitors. She brought flowers, read to him, and helped nurses with his care. When Marcus finally regained consciousness on June 18, Tiana was alone with him in the room. According to what Marcus would eventually reveal, Tiana leaned close to him and began pleading with him not to tell police the truth. She begged for forgiveness, claiming she had blacked out during their argument. She allegedly told him, "You pushed me to this by threatening to ruin my life," and promised she would do anything to make it up to him if he would maintain her story about an intruder. Marcus simply stared at the ceiling, expressionless, never acknowledging Tiana's presence. When medical staff entered the room minutes later, they found Tiana crying and Marcus silent, his vital signs showing elevated stress levels. When detectives interviewed Marcus that evening, he claimed he had no memory of the attack, saying everything happened too quickly and from behind. He couldn't remember who had stabbed him. This statement reinforced Tiana's account of an intruder, and the police continued to investigate the case as a home invasion. For several weeks, police canvassed the neighborhood, checked security footage from nearby homes and businesses, and followed up on potential leads about break-ins in the area. They found nothing concrete linking any known suspects to the attack on Marcus. Without evidence to contradict Tiana's version of events, and with Marcus claiming memory loss about the attack, the investigation gradually lost momentum. The detective assigned to the case kept it open but shifted focus to other, more promising cases. Marcus was released from the hospital in mid-July, still requiring extensive physical therapy and wound care. He moved in with a family member temporarily, telling Tiana he needed space to recover both physically and mentally from the trauma. By early September, in a move that surprised their friends and family, Marcus announced he was moving back home with Tiana. He told concerned relatives that the time apart had helped him realize how much he valued his marriage and that the attack had given him a new perspective on life. Tiana created social media posts about second chances and healing together. She had been supportive throughout his recovery, driving him to medical appointments, managing his medications, and creating a peaceful environment for his return home. "I couldn't believe they were back together so quickly after such a traumatic event," said a family friend. But Tiana seemed determined to make everything perfect for him, and Marcus just went along with it. Neighbors noted that while Tiana threw herself into rebuilding their life together, gardening, hosting small gatherings, and attending church, Marcus seemed changed. He was described as distant, quiet, and watchful, often staring into space during social interactions. "It was like he was there physically but somewhere else mentally," one church member recalled. Tiana would be talking animatedly to everyone, and he would just be watching her with this unreadable expression. What no one realized was that behind Marcus's blank stares and quiet demeanor, a plan was forming. On November 3, 2019, Tiana's mother called police to report that she hadn't heard from her daughter in 3 days, which was highly unusual. When officers performed a welfare check at the Johnson residence, they found Marcus sitting calmly in the living room watching television. He told them Tiana had gone to visit a college friend in another state and must have poor cell reception. The officers noted nothing suspicious and left, but Tiana's continued absence raised concerns. Her car was still in the garage, and the friend she supposedly visited confirmed she had no plans to host Tiana. After 5 days with no contact, police opened a missing persons investigation. Initial searches of the home revealed no obvious evidence of foul play. Marcus cooperated with investigators, allowing them to examine the house and his car. He maintained that he believed Tiana had left voluntarily, suggesting she might have been overwhelmed by caring for him after his injury. "I'm worried too," he told investigators. "But she's been under a lot of stress since the attack. Maybe she just needed a break." The break in the case came on November 15, when police brought cadaver dogs to search the property after neighbors mentioned recent landscaping work that Marcus had done alone. The dogs alerted handlers to an area in the backyard where a new water feature had been installed. Beneath several large decorative boulders, investigators discovered Tiana's body wrapped in plastic sheeting. The autopsy revealed that she had died from asphyxiation, likely strangled. Based on decomposition, the medical examiner estimated she had been killed on October 30 or 31, more than 2 weeks before her body was found. A search of Marcus's computer revealed searches for perfect murder, how to dispose of body, and countries with no extradition. His online purchase history showed orders for plastic sheeting, tarps, and industrial cleaning supplies delivered in mid-October. Most chilling was a journal found hidden in the garage. In it, Marcus had methodically documented his thoughts since the stabbing, revealing that he had remembered everything about the attack from the moment he regained consciousness. "She took everything from me that night," one entry read. "My trust, my future, my dignity. She gets to walk around free, playing the devoted wife, while I carry these scars forever. There is no forgiveness for this. Only justice. My justice." The journal detailed how he had deliberately pretended to have memory loss about the stabbing to buy time and avoid suspicion. He had planned his revenge meticulously, waiting until Tiana believed everything was back to normal before executing his plan. Marcus Johnson was arrested and charged with first-degree murder on November 16, 2019. Unlike his wife had done with her crime, he made no attempt to deny his actions. During his first interrogation, he spoke calmly about killing Tiana. "I waited until she thought everything was back to normal," he told detectives. "I watched her try to rebuild our life like nothing happened, like she hadn't tried to kill me over some office fling. Every night I woke up feeling the knife going in again." Marcus described how he had strangled Tiana during an embrace on the night of October 30 after weeks of planning. He had already prepared the gravesite, digging beneath their new water feature during the day while Tiana was at work. "When it was done, I felt nothing," he said. "No regret, no sadness, just completion." The trial of Marcus Johnson began in May 2020. His defense team attempted to argue diminished capacity, claiming that the trauma of the stabbing and subsequent events had left Marcus with post-traumatic stress disorder and an altered mental state. Prosecutors portrayed the murder as a calculated revenge killing, pointing to the journal entries and extensive planning as evidence of clear premeditation. They emphasized that Marcus had manipulated both Tiana and law enforcement by maintaining the intruder story, giving himself time to plan the perfect murder. The prosecution revealed the full extent of Tiana's affair and her attack on Marcus, painting a picture of a marriage destroyed by betrayal and violence. They acknowledged her crime, but argued that Marcus's response, cold, calculated murder, went beyond any justifiable reaction. The defense countered by emphasizing the psychological impact of Tiana's betrayal and her attempt to kill him. They presented expert testimony about trauma responses and how Marcus's methodical planning might actually have been a symptom of his PTSD, rather than evidence of cold-blooded premeditation. After 7 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for nearly 9 hours before finding Marcus guilty of second-degree murder, a lesser charge than prosecutors had sought, indicating the jury believed there were mitigating factors in the case. At his sentencing hearing, Marcus finally broke his stoic demeanor. In a statement to the court, he addressed Tiana's family directly. "I won't ask for forgiveness because I'm not sorry she's gone," he said, "but I am sorry for the pain I've caused you. You lost your daughter twice, first to the person she became when she chose to betray and attack me, and then to my need for justice. You deserve better than both of us." The judge sentenced Marcus to 18 years in prison, acknowledging the extraordinary circumstances of the case while emphasizing that vigilante justice could never be condoned in a civilized society. The case of Marcus and Tiana Johnson sparked intense debate about relationship violence, betrayal, and revenge. Some viewed Marcus as a victim who had snapped after unimaginable betrayal, while others saw him as a calculating killer who had used his victimhood as cover for premeditated murder. Mental health experts who reviewed the case noted the dangerous escalation pattern, from Tiana's infidelity to her violent response when exposed to Marcus's calculated revenge. This case illustrates how quickly domestic situations can spiral into life-threatening violence, explained one forensic psychologist. What begins as emotional betrayal culminates in murder, because neither party sought help when warning signs appeared. Today, the house on Elm Street stands empty, its value diminished by its dark history. Marcus Johnson remains in Northern State Correctional Facility, where prison officials describe him as a model inmate who rarely speaks of his crime. "I found peace," he wrote in a letter to his brother. "Not happiness, not freedom, but peace. I know what I did and why I did it. I paid for her betrayal with 6 stab wounds. She paid for her violence with her life. Now, I'm paying with my freedom. The accounts are settled." The case stands as a stark reminder of how quickly seemingly ordinary lives can unravel into tragedy when betrayal meets violence and the desire for revenge overcomes reason. 2 successful careers, 15 years of marriage, and countless possibilities for the future, all ended by a sequence of choices that transformed 2 people who once loved each other into predator and prey in a cycle of violence that ultimately destroyed them both. The small coastal town of Bayside hadn't seen a major crime in over a decade when emergency sirens shattered the pre-dawn stillness on October 3, 2021. First responders rushed to a modest bungalow on Harborview Lane, where they found Raymond Wilson bleeding heavily from multiple stab wounds on the kitchen floor. His wife Alicia frantically told paramedics that an intruder had broken in through the back door while they slept. As the ambulance sped toward the county hospital with Raymond fighting for his life, no one suspected they were witnessing only the opening act of a tragedy that would eventually claim another life and forever change the peaceful community. Raymond and Alicia Wilson had been fixtures in Bayside since they moved there 8 years earlier from Chicago. Both African-American professionals in their mid-30s, they had met during their undergraduate years at Howard University before marrying after graduation. Their journey from modest beginnings to professional success represented the American dream to many in their community. Raymond had worked his way up from an entry-level position to become operations manager at the regional shipping company that served as Bayside's economic anchor. Colleagues described him as methodical, reliable, and unfailingly fair, qualities that had earned him respect from both the dock workers he had once counted himself among and the executives who had promoted him. Alicia had built a career as a real estate agent specializing in helping first-time homebuyers navigate the complex process of property ownership. Her warm personality and genuine interest in her clients' needs had quickly made her one of the top agents in the county. She served on the town's Economic Development Committee and had recently launched a workshop series to help historically disadvantaged residents understand pathways to home ownership. "They were role models in our community," recalled a neighbor who had known the couple for years. "Raymond was quieter, more reserved, but you could count on him for anything. Alicia was the outgoing one, always organizing neighborhood events and connecting people. They balanced each other perfectly." The Wilsons had no children, though they mentored several teens through a local youth program. They had renovated their coastal bungalow themselves, transforming it from a rundown property to one of the most charming homes in the area. Their backyard barbecues and holiday gatherings had become community traditions, bringing together people from all walks of Bayside life. What neighbors and friends didn't see were the growing tensions that had begun to strain the Wilsons' marriage roughly 18 months before the stabbing incident. Financial pressures had mounted as Raymond invested significant savings in his younger brother's restaurant venture, which eventually failed. Simultaneously, Alicia's career had begun to flourish, shifting the power dynamics in a relationship that had always prided itself on equality. She started feeling trapped, a colleague from Alicia's real estate office later told investigators. She'd worked so hard to build her business, but Raymond seemed to expect her to maintain the same domestic responsibilities she'd had when she was just starting out, and he became increasingly controlling about money after his brother's restaurant collapsed. The pandemic had further strained their relationship, with Raymond working reduced hours while Alicia's business boomed as urban residents sought homes in smaller communities like Bayside. Their social circles contracted, leaving them more isolated with their growing resentments. In April 2021, Alicia's agency hired a new marketing director who had relocated from Los Angeles. Tall, charismatic, and recently divorced, the man quickly became a central figure in the office. Security cameras from various businesses around town would later show Alicia and this colleague meeting for coffee, lingering over drinks at a waterfront bar, and sitting close together in her car in the empty office parking lot after business hours. By June, text messages recovered from Alicia's phone revealed their professional relationship had evolved into a physical affair. Hotel receipts showed regular Wednesday afternoon meetings at an establishment off the highway connecting Bayside to the neighboring larger city. Credit card statements displayed purchases at lingerie stores and upscale restaurants where Alicia had never taken Raymond. Meanwhile, Raymond remained unaware, his attention divided between his job responsibilities and attempts to help his brother manage the debt from the failed restaurant. He noticed Alicia's increasing absences and emotional distance, but attributed them to her growing career demands and their financial tensions. On October 2, 2021, Raymond was scheduled to attend a weekend leadership retreat with his company. A last-minute cancellation among the organizing team meant he returned home unexpectedly Friday evening. He had stopped to pick up flowers and Alicia's favorite takeout, hoping to reconnect over a quiet dinner. Instead, he found their home empty. Calling Alicia's office, he learned she had left early for a client meeting. As he waited, Raymond decided to use Alicia's laptop to check on a joint investment account they had recently discussed. When he opened the computer, it displayed her still active email account with dozens of intimate messages between her and her colleague. According to evidence later gathered, Raymond spent hours reading through months of correspondence that revealed not just physical infidelity, but deep emotional betrayal. Alicia had discussed their marital problems in humiliating detail, complained about Raymond's sexual performance, and even explored the possibility of leaving him once she had secured a promised partnership at her agency. When Alicia returned home around 11:30 p.m., she found Raymond sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open before him. Security footage from their doorbell camera captured her expression, shifting from surprise to fear as she entered the house and realized what had happened. What happened next would later be reconstructed from physical evidence, medical reports, and eventually Raymond's reluctant testimony. The kitchen became the scene of an intense confrontation that quickly escalated beyond shouting. Based on later statements, Raymond had told Alicia their marriage was over and that he intended to expose her affair to their friends, family, and professional contacts, potentially damaging the carefully cultivated image she had built in the community. As the argument intensified, Alicia became increasingly desperate. When Raymond turned to leave the kitchen, she grabbed a carving knife from the wooden block on the counter and attacked him from behind. The medical report documented 6 distinct stab wounds, 3 to his back, 1 to his left shoulder as he turned to defend himself, and 2 to his abdomen during the ensuing struggle. The final wound missed his vital organs but caused significant internal bleeding. Raymond collapsed on the kitchen floor, rapidly losing consciousness as Alicia, apparently shocked by her own actions, stood frozen for several minutes before calling 911 at 2:17 a.m. The recorded call captured her panicked voice, claiming an intruder had broken in and attacked Raymond while they slept. When first responders arrived 12 minutes later, they found Alicia applying pressure to Raymond's wounds with kitchen towels. She told officers that she had awakened to Raymond's shouts and found a masked figure standing over him before the attacker fled through the back door. The responding officers noted that the back door was indeed unlocked, and in a town with historically low crime rates, they initially had no reason to doubt her account. Raymond was rushed to County General Hospital in critical condition, having lost nearly 1/3 of his blood volume. He underwent emergency surgery lasting 7 hours as doctors worked to repair a punctured lung, damaged kidney, and severe muscle and tissue trauma. The detective assigned to the case interviewed Alicia at the hospital while Raymond underwent surgery. She maintained her story about a home invasion, describing waking to sounds of a struggle and glimpsing a tall figure in dark clothing standing over Raymond before the attacker fled. She suggested that recent reports of break-ins in communities along the coast might be connected, though Bayside itself had experienced no such incidents. The physical evidence at the scene presented an ambiguous picture. There were no obvious signs of forced entry, but the Wilsons' home, like many in the relaxed coastal community, lacked sophisticated security. Nothing appeared to be missing, though, in her distressed state, Alicia couldn't immediately confirm if any valuables had been taken. With no witnesses, limited physical evidence, and the primary victim unconscious, Investigators initially treated the case as a possible home invasion. They increased patrols in the area, checked traffic cameras at town entry points, and advised residents to secure their homes, creating a wave of anxiety in a community unaccustomed to violent crime. Raymond remained unconscious for 4 days following surgery. During this time, Alicia rarely left his bedside, presenting herself as the devoted wife to hospital staff and visitors. She brought fresh flowers daily, helped nurses with his care, and kept a constant vigil, appearing exhausted but determined. On October 7, when Raymond finally regained consciousness, hospital security cameras recorded their first moments alone together. Though the footage had no audio, Alicia could be seen becoming increasingly animated, leaning close to speak urgently to him, occasionally touching his arm or face in apparent pleading. Body language experts would later suggest she was begging or attempting to persuade him. According to Raymond's eventual statement, Alicia had desperately pleaded with him not to tell police the truth. She claimed she had blacked out during their argument, that she hadn't meant to hurt him so badly, and that the attack was completely out of character, driven by fear when he threatened to destroy her reputation. She allegedly reminded him of her support through his brother's financial troubles and promised she would do anything to make amends if he would maintain her story about an intruder. The security footage clearly showed Raymond's response. He simply stared at the ceiling, expressionless, never acknowledging her presence or words. When a nurse entered minutes later, she found Alicia crying and Raymond silent, his vital signs showing elevated stress levels despite his outward calm. When detectives interviewed Raymond later that day, he claimed to have no clear memory of the attack, saying everything happened too quickly and from behind. He couldn't confirm or deny Alicia's account of an intruder. The police, noting the potential for trauma-induced memory loss, decided to continue monitoring his recovery while pursuing other investigative angles. For the next 2 weeks, as Raymond's condition stabilized, police continued to investigate the alleged home invasion. They canvassed the neighborhood again, checked security footage from nearby businesses, and followed up on tips about unfamiliar vehicles seen in the area. Nothing substantive emerged to support the intruder theory. Meanwhile, subtle inconsistencies in Alicia's account began to accumulate. The timeline she described didn't align with neighbors' reports of when they heard shouting. The back door showed no signs of recent forced entry. Most significantly, forensic analysis of the kitchen revealed evidence of cleanup efforts in areas away from where Raymond had collapsed. When investigators obtained a warrant to examine the couple's electronic devices, they discovered the incriminating emails Raymond had found, along with text messages Alicia had sent to her lover just hours before the stabbing. "Are found out. Confrontation imminent. Will call you when I can." Most damning was footage from the couple's doorbell camera, which contradicted Alicia's claim that they had both been asleep when alleged intruder entered. It showed her returning home at 11:27 p.m. and Raymond answering the door with an expression that suggested he had been awake and waiting. By late October, as Raymond was transferred to a rehabilitation facility, prosecutors had enough evidence to charge Alicia with attempted first-degree murder. Rather than arresting her at home, they allowed her attorney to arrange a voluntary surrender, acknowledging her deep community ties and lack of prior criminal history. The town reacted with shock to the news. The story of a respected real estate agent stabbing her husband after he discovered her affair quickly spread through local and then regional media. Friends and colleagues found it difficult to reconcile the warm, community-minded Alicia they knew with the desperate woman who had nearly killed her husband. While awaiting trial, Alicia was released on $500,000 bail, secured using the equity in their home. Her attorney began constructing a defense strategy based on temporary emotional distress and alleged controlling behavior by Raymond that had never been previously documented or reported. As the legal process inched forward, Raymond completed his physical rehabilitation and returned to his job on a part-time basis in January 2022. He declined all interview requests, citing ongoing legal proceedings, and moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. In a development that stunned prosecutors and the community alike, Raymond announced in February that he would not testify against his wife. Without his cooperation, the prosecution's case weakened considerably. After lengthy negotiations, Alicia accepted a plea deal for aggravated assault, receiving 3 years probation, mandatory counseling, and 300 hours of community service. By May 2022, in a twist that bewildered those following the case, Raymond and Alicia announced they were attempting to reconcile. They began attending counseling together and were occasionally spotted at local restaurants engaged in intense conversation. Alicia had taken a position with a smaller real estate firm in a neighboring town and focused publicly on making amends. Her social media accounts, dormant since the night of the stabbing, reactivated with reflective posts about redemption, second chances, and the hard work of rebuilding trust. Raymond remained largely private about the reconciliation. When questioned by concerned friends, he would simply state that everyone deserves a second chance, and that the situation was more complex than outsiders could understand. "I couldn't believe they were trying again," said one longtime friend of the couple. "She nearly killed him. But when I asked Ray about it, he just said, 'I have my reasons,' in this flat voice I'd never heard him use before." Those who interacted with the couple during this period noted a fundamental change in their dynamic. While Alicia appeared earnest in her attempts to repair the relationship, Raymond's engagement seemed mechanical. He participated in their public appearances with a detached politeness that some found unsettling. "It was like watching someone play a role," recalled a server at a restaurant where they dined regularly. She would be talking animatedly, touching his hand, trying so hard, and he would respond with all the right words, but no emotion behind his eyes. Behind this facade of reconciliation, Raymond was methodically executing a different kind of plan. On August 17, 2022, a colleague from Alicia's real estate office contacted police when she failed to appear for an important client meeting and wasn't answering calls or texts. Officers conducting a welfare check found Raymond at their bungalow, calmly repainting the kitchen cabinets. He explained that Alicia had left 2 days earlier for a self-improvement retreat, seeking to address the emotional issues that had contributed to their marital problems. The officers noted nothing suspicious and left, but when the retreat center in question confirmed they had no record of Alicia Wilson, concerns mounted. After 72 hours with no contact, unusual for someone as connected as Alicia, police opened a missing persons investigation. Initial searches revealed her car still in the garage, her passport in their shared safe, and no evidence of bus or train tickets purchased in her name. While Raymond continued to cooperate with investigators, allowing them to search the property and examine his vehicle, he maintained that Alicia had arranged transportation to the retreat through a friend and might have extended her stay without informing him. "We've been giving each other more independence as part of our healing process," he told detectives with the same flat affect friends had noticed in recent months. "I'm concerned, but I'm trying to respect her need for space." The investigation took a decisive turn on September 2, when a contractor hired to install an irrigation system in the Wilsons' backyard discovered disturbed soil beneath a newly constructed garden shed. Excavating the area, officers found Alicia's body wrapped in plastic sheeting and buried approximately 4 feet deep. The autopsy revealed she had died from asphyxiation consistent with strangulation. Based on decomposition, the medical examiner estimated she had been killed around August 14th, 3 days before she was reported missing. A search of Raymond's workspace at the shipping company revealed a detailed journal hidden inside a ventilation duct. In it, he had meticulously documented his thoughts since the stabbing, revealing a calculated plan for revenge that had been forming since his first moments of consciousness in the hospital. "She believes I've forgiven her," one entry read. "She has no idea that every night, when I close my eyes, I feel the knife entering my back again. Every time I see her smile, I remember how she smiled at me while I bled on our kitchen floor. Forgiveness is impossible. Balance must be restored." The journal detailed his systematic approach, pretending to reconcile to lower her suspicion, studying her schedule to identify the perfect opportunity, and planning every aspect of her disappearance. He had constructed the garden shed weeks in advance, digging the grave beneath it during hours when neighbors would be at work.
About you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only. Shout out to King Saul's boss in the build about you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only.
Shout out to Sauce the boss, of course, man. Who's in the building, man? Shout out to Sauce the boss, of course, man. Who's in the building, man? Shout out to Sauce the boss, of course, man. Who's in the building, man? Shout out to
about you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only. Shout out to King Saul's boss in the build about you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only. Shout out to King Saul's boss in the build about you, and it's no one else